Be curious. As simple as that sounds, I think when you're curious, you don't have predisposed ideas in your head or beliefs in your head or stereotypes in your head. You have an open mind and an open heart. If we could all be a little bit more curious, we could accomplish a lot more with a lot more people and for a lot more people.
Welcome to the Negative Space Podcast. I'm Patricia McLoughlin, General Manager of the Anthem Awards, and also your host. Every day, thousands of young people are defined by the worst decision they've ever made. We debate crime, punishment, and second chances, but far less often do we ask what it actually takes to help someone build a different future. Today's guest, Chad Hauser, has spent nearly 2 decades challenging the assumptions we make about justice-involved youth, not through theory, but through a restaurant kitchen. His organization, Café Momentum, has become one of the country's most innovative models for transforming lives and pairing culinary training with the support young people need to thrive. And the results speak for themselves. Where Texas's juvenile recidivism rate sits near 48%, at Café Momentum, it's closer to 15%. Today, we're talking about second chances, systems that need reimagining, and what happens when we choose to invest in potential instead of punishment. Chad, welcome to the Negative Space.
Thank you very much. Grateful to be here.
To get us started, I would love to hear a little bit about your career in the kitchen and what initially drove you to start Café Momentum.
Sure. I think for storytelling's sake and, correlating it with the young people we work with, I think it's important to note that I graduated high school only knowing that I was supposed to go to college, like it was demanded, and I was given all the resources to do so. Got to college, spent 2 years doing the basics, having no idea what I wanted to do with my life. At 20 years old, made the incredibly smart decision that I was going to base my entire life and career on the poem Under Milkwood by the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas and become an English literature major. And that would check the box to fulfill my obligation to my parents that I was going to graduate high school or college, as it were. But I told my parents my plan and said, but, once I get my degree, I'm going to try cooking because it's the only thing that really seems of interest and exciting to me. And my dad, who was having grand visions of his English literature son spending the rest of his life sleeping on his parents' couch, encouraged me to go to culinary school, and went to culinary school and, arrogantly said, my goal here is to own a restaurant and be the chef. And about 8-9 years later, had an opportunity in 2007 to sell my house, take the equity out of it, take out a loan, and buy into a restaurant in the uptown area of Dallas, become a chef and co-owner of the restaurant. That was right when the economy tanked. I went from thinking, I had hit the ultimate moment of my career to thinking I was an idiot and I was, a single dad of a tween daughter, and I was going to ruin her future and not help her go to college and, all those things. But despite that recession and the first year of co-ownership, I was nominated as best up and coming chef in Dallas by a prominent local publication and helped grow the business by almost 40% in spite of restaurants all around us closing left and right. But it was right at the 1-year mark of co-ownership that I was volunteered to go into a Dallas County juvenile detention facility and teach 8 young men who were incarcerated at the time, teenagers, to make ice cream because they were going to get to compete against college culinary students in an ice cream competition at the Dallas Farmers Market. And the moment I met those 8 young men, I felt such shame because the moment I met them, I realized that I had stereotyped them, I had labeled them, I had judged them. And it wasn't just that I was wrong, it's that I thought I was a better human being, and I wasn't. I was confronted with the reality literally face to face. That led me to spend 3.5 hours listening to 8 young men. While on the surface I was teaching them to make ice cream, the reality was that they were teaching me who they were, how they were, why they were. And 2 days later, these 8 kids are bussed down to the farmer's market wearing jail clothes, competing against college culinary students in chef pants, chef coats. And yet these kids were so proud. And at the end of the competition, one of them won the whole thing. And when he won, he told me, I just love to cook. He said, I just love to make food and give it to people and put a smile on their face. And arguably, I can't think of a time I've ever heard a human being describe their heart in a more beautiful way. He told me when he got released, he was going to get a job in a restaurant. He asked my chef opinion on whether he should work at Wendy's or Chili's. I told him whoever hires you first. But as I drove home that day, I went from being excited to and inspired to angry and frustrated and sad because I immediately knew he was never going to make it to a Wendy's or Chili's. I knew his story. I knew he was going back to the same house, the same street, same neighbor, all the things that had led him in a path to jail to begin with. They hadn't changed. But over the coming days and weeks and months, I just kept thinking obsessively about him and his situation. And it led me to thinking about me and my life at 16. And there was an acknowledgement that for both of us, our lives have been dictated by choices that were made for us before we were born because of the color of our skin, the socioeconomic class we were born in, the part of town that we were born in, which indicates what resources we had, in my case, an abundance of, and in his case, a depravity of. I just thought if that's the way the world really does work, I don't want to be a part of that. And it led me to volunteer more of my time inside the detention facility just to be able to listen. So I would teach kids to cook so I could learn. And that's ultimately, what led to the idea behind Cafe Momentum was hearing the staff and the kids talking about consistency and stability and thinking about how could I use my skills to create a space that provided consistency and stability for the kids in the ways that they're seeking for it to show up in their lives.
That consistency is one of the biggest parts of this work and why it works.
Yes.
But what did you see specifically in these kids that wasn't getting tapped into in other places that you saw that potential for them to do more?
Great question. Let's go back to that first ice cream competition. The kid spent 3.5 hours learning how to make ice cream with ingredients that, he had arguably never tasted before. I mean, the winning ice cream was strawberry cantaloupe and basil. He had never eaten a fresh piece of basil before, but he put it with strawberries and cantaloupe and he won. And I think that seeing their enthusiasm, going into cooking classes and seeing the pride that they took in something as simple as making fried rice, seeing their ability to process instruction very quickly, their desire to do more, be more, was abundant and immediate, but also understanding that the roadblocks that were put in their ways, in some ways, literal physical roadblocks, and in some ways, metaphorical roadblocks, were ones that no human being should have in front of them, and no human being is built to maneuver around on their own. And yet these children were told, figure it out. And not only was it not fair, it's not practical, it's not probable, and it's not helping our community with helping these young people, tap into their full potential.
Yeah. I've worked in a handful of restaurants, and the kitchen is often almost a little bit of a pressure cooker. It can be a little intense in there. But what is it also about that environment that has people showing up differently and really grows their confidence in a whole different way?
Well, restaurants in general are intense. My background is in kitchens, but that's probably because that's a comfortable intensity to me. Dealing with customers and having them complain nonstop is a very uncomfortable intensity to me. And so for our kids, part of our program is that they work in all the different stations in the restaurant. So it's twofold. Number one is they're learning new life skills and social skills. They're learning the difference between disagreeing appropriately in the kitchen when you're trying to get food out for 15 tables at once and disagreeing with a customer who sat down 10 minutes ago, ordered 3 minutes ago, and is already complaining that they waited 45 minutes for their food. But they're doing it in an environment in which they have mentors and coaches there to help support them. So they don't feel alone. And that helps them to kind of build their confidence as they're also building muscle memory on how to utilize those skills and tools.
Yeah, that makes complete and total sense. And I'm curious as well, as you were first developing Cafe Momentum, I'm sure there are people from within the system that you were already working in or other voices that were pushing back on you in different ways. But how were you able to silence that and just continue to push forward?
Going around the city and telling people I wanted to open up a nonprofit restaurant, taking kids out of jail and teach them to play with knives and fire, was just overwhelmingly met with great positivity and enthusiasm. Kidding. But It was actually, I was told some of the most egregious things I've ever heard in my entire life. I was asked what I was going to do when the kids stabbed each other in the kitchen. I was told over and over again, those kids don't want to work. They just want to collect a check. They've never been to a nice restaurant. They can't cook your food. And for me, it's not just egregious, but like you're saying that about children, number
Mhm.
one. Number two is they hear you. And that's probably the most important thing is you're putting a scarlet letter on a child's chest and saying this is who you are. Not who you were born to be, but I'm telling you right now, this is all you ever will be. And so our kids lived that life and fulfilled that prophecy. I also knew this. If you met them, you would never say that about them. You would see incredible human beings with giant hearts, beautiful smiles, big brains, and tons of potential. And so my idea was to create that proximity. And so in June of 2011, myself and a small group of friends launched our very first pop-up dinner. And the idea was to go into one of the best restaurants in Dallas on a Sunday night when they're closed, sell tickets to a private dinner. The chef writes a four-course menu, and the staff not only working alongside the chef in the kitchen, but serving to the level and quality of service of that restaurant were 8 young men that we would bring in from a juvenile detention facility for the evening. Anecdotally, I didn't think anybody would show up. The goal was to get 50 people to pay $50 to come to the dinner. But based on all the stereotypes and the pushback, didn't think anybody would show up. I had devised a plan to call my mom and have her guilt the ladies in our Bible study class into coming. So initially we would have like 10 God-fearing women that were biblically bound to not judge at our dinner. But the dinner sold out in 24 hours. The night of the dinner, at the end of the dinner, every single person that attended walked out the door, looked me in the eyes, and said, "This could be my son." And that was it. That proximity, that opportunity to see our kids what they're capable of and watch them walking in their greatness changed everything. We went on to do 41 of those over a 3.5 year period, and about 12 months into them, decided that I needed to walk the talk and walked away from my business partnership to focus on getting Cafe Momentum open full time.
And what did that process look like to find a space within Dallas, get all of the permissions and staffing in place and the support systems?
Building the plane while you're flying it, I still say to this day, while Cafe Momentum in Dallas has been open 11 years and Pittsburgh for 3 and Atlanta for 1, we're still learning, because we're still listening to our kids and adapting and growing in ways that best support them as the community change, needs change, generations change, and so forth. But one of the first things that I learned in a hard lesson was that location matters. We were doing these pop-up dinners and I was working with young men that were at the time incarcerated. When they would get released, they're calling me and they're saying like, "Hey, I need a job." One young man, I went and picked him up at his house and drove him to a friend's restaurant. It was a 12-minute car ride from his front door to the restaurant's front door. And while he was interviewing for the job, I looked up the public transit schedule. It was 4 bus transfers, an hour and a half each way.
Wow.
And I realized as this kid's enthusiastically interviewing for a job that I set him up for failure, because there's no way he's going to be able to sustain that type of of travel to get to and from work. And so we had to study public transportation and understand where the intersection points are and what's the path of least resistance for our kids to get to where we are. And that's why we ended up downtown, which is arguably not the best place for foot traffic and diners, more of a destination dining place, but we had to put it in the space that we knew would provide the easiest path for our kids to get to. And then there are other things and other factors that, we have to look at, even just studying the zip codes that more kids are coming from to understand the community environments, because, part of our work doesn't extend to just workforce development in the restaurant. We provide 24/7 case management. We provide mental health services, and we provide education. Here in Dallas, we built our own high school, which is a nationally accredited high school, Cafe Momentum Academy. But addressing all of these barriers means, rolling up your sleeves and getting your elbows dirty to really dig in. Sometimes that means supporting family in addition to the child. Sometimes, each person is their own individual person with their own individual lived experience, and we're not a one size fits all. So it takes a lot of building that out and assessing and knowing and understanding so that you're accommodating with the appropriate resources as soon as you're working with the kids.
For someone that's working at the restaurant, what does that day to day really look like to come in and clock in and get to work?
Yeah. It starts even before they clock in. In addition to the restaurant, we also, every Cafe Momentum has a community services center. And the community services center is first and foremost a safe space for them to be at when they're not working. But it's also full of programming that they're seeking in their lives. So our case management team is headquartered out of the community services center. We have a Ninny's closet named after my mom, but it's a supply closet that kids can go in and get clothes, school supplies, hygiene products, feminine hygiene products, baby clothes, diapers, formula, and take whatever they need, no questions asked, all the way to school and education resources, and having other resource partners coming in and being present on a routine basis. So our kids are continuing to build that cachet of resource and bring them back into the home in the community. So many of our kids are showing up, whether it be for school, whether it be for those resources in the morning, and then depending on, in Pittsburgh and in Atlanta, they do lunch service. Dallas doesn't. Some of them are clocking in for lunch service. Some of them are clocking into prep. And it kind of gets the day started. On days that there is no dinner service, they're finishing up a little earlier, and sometimes might be provided with enrichment opportunities, which is part of our program in Tiers of Success. Our kids have to complete a certain amount of enrichment hours, give back hours. So there may be opportunities for that, all the way to on nights of dinner service. They're getting the restaurant ready, finalizing their stations and getting everything organized and prepped on their stations. If they're working in the kitchen, getting the table set, the dining room ready, open table, making sure that we know how many people are coming in, that we know where they're sitting, and we know if there's a special circumstance surrounding their visit for the evening. Going through a pre-shift meeting, and then it's go time. We're entertaining guests, and then at the end, it's restaurant cleanup. So cleaning up the space like we haven't been in it at all for the day, and getting it ready to go for tomorrow.
That's awesome. And for you, as the person that is spearheading a lot of this, what does it look like to have so many moving parts and kind of the side of running this business and running the program and having just a lot of plates in the air at all moments in time?
Gosh, I told somebody recently that I constantly feel like I'm drowning, but it's in the ocean that I've begged to swim in. So every time I come up for air, the view is spectacular. I feel like most days I feel like that. People ask me sometimes, like, what's a day in the life? And like, uh, no 2 minutes are ever the same. I could be on a call with the district attorney in Indiana, all the way to then switching gears and in an advisory council meeting for the Dallas County District Attorney, to then being on a funder call, to my phone rings and it's a young man who was previously in the program in Dallas and is currently serving 35 years and checks in with me every week. And he and I are having a conversation and talking. And then it's talking to the executive directors and troubleshooting, like, what's going on in Pittsburgh? How do we drive more traffic into the restaurant? What's Dallas doing to drive more traffic? Then we're on a podcast, and then we're dealing with real estate in Denver. And I love the challenge, but I think more than anything, what is most important is the quality of people that are comprised of the Cafe Momentum team. It'll never be lost on me that some of the most extraordinary human beings in head and heart are driving so much of what we're doing. 18 years ago, I walked into a juvenile detention facility for the very first time, and never in a million years on that day would I've ever thought that literally some of the most incredible and smartest people I know would have the honor and privilege of doing this work alongside. I think that's the thing that drives me every day, that we're on the right path, is that I get to walk it with so many incredible people, and have met over 1,700 kids who each one of them has changed my life forever.
And we've talked about you guys are across multiple cities now. You've started in Dallas, then expanded to Pittsburgh, then Atlanta. How did you take this model and transition it to these different communities? And also, what did the decision look like for expansion?
Well, I'd always wanted to expand. I think from the get go, and I think some of it initially is is the restaurant side of me, right? That kind of growth mindset. I think the other part of it was, at least initially, was like, hey, this could probably be helpful in more cities than just Dallas, right? The kids that I'm working with are victims of circumstance, environment, and all these things that we historically acknowledge are had been built through systemic bias, systemic racism, institutional racism, and so always wanted to scale. I arrogantly told a reporter once that I wanted to open up more Cafe Momentums than Starbucks. That was before I realized there were 28,000 Starbucks. I think as I've grown and as I've learned more and gotten deeper into the work, it's shifted a lot for me around, my why in expanding is because there's 60,000 children right now, as you and I are talking, that are in jail in this country, and their outcomes have been predetermined, not by them, but by the rest of the country. I also know that those children, I know them. I've been around them for 18 years, and I know the visceral reaction that I have when you hear them talk about what it feels like to walk down the street and see somebody cross over to the other side of the street when they see them coming, or clutch their purse or lock their car doors, and the message that sends and reverberates loud in their heads. So for me, the idea to expand, in the national team we launched to expand was focused on building out the physical locations. But that's more proof of concept. I mean, we definitely want to work with more kids, but the proof of concept is to build something much bigger, a national conversation around the way our country thinks about investing in our kids, and specifically the kids that we're working with. What we've shown at Cafe Momentum is, it's workforce development, 24/7 case management, education, mental health. It's those four things. And that when an organization brings community to invest in our kids, we see what them achieving their full potential looks like. We see how it reverberates in the community, in their homes, on their streets, in their neighborhoods, and in the community as a whole. We've seen the way that it changes people's hearts and minds around our kids, and builds bridges in community where there previously haven't been. So for me, expansion is even more so about that national conversation and the relationships and networks that we build because of it. And I'll give you, to me, which is a very exciting example. Over 2 years ago, we started working with a restaurant group out of Wichita, Kansas, that owns 300 restaurants across the country that they're either a franchisor of or a franchisee of. And their interest in our model was, hey, we think that the way that you show up for your kids is the way that we can and should show up for our staff. It speaks to our values as a company. It speaks to the culture of our company. So we want to study your model. And then we want to pilot your model in a couple of our stores. And if we can get it down and it does what we believe that it'll do, then we're going to spread it across all of our stores. And so we worked with them and they studied our model, and we worked alongside them. We ended up doing a pop-up dinner in Wichita, Kansas with the mayor and city council people. And it was their announcement. And we worked with local Wichita justice involved youth. And it was their announcement that, hey, we're gonna pilot this model in some of our stores here in Wichita. And they were candid. We're not going to work with exclusively justice involved youth. But what we know is that our highest turnover rate of our staff is our entry level employees, because they're one sick day away from not being able to pay rent or car payment, or what have you. And then the domino effect from there. And my challenge back to them was, you say you're not working with our kids, but the reality is the people that you're talking about are the moms, dads, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins of our kids. And so you're supporting our kids quite directly by helping their family along too. We're over a year into them piloting it in those 7 stores. Their retention rate has shot up by 80%. And what they found is it wasn't just entry level employees that were reaching out for case management support and mental health services. It was a wider swath, and it's been so successful that they're now going to expand it to all of their North Carolina stores, and they're going to keep going. And so for me, What's most exciting about that is that it's scaling much faster than we can, that it is building investment and conversation and community at a faster rate than we could do it, and it's just as organic and authentic, you know. So I'm really excited about that. I think the other part, in answer to your question, is when we do go into a new city, we spend a lot of time investing in building relationships and earning trust in that city. Something that we believe emphatically is that communities are not monolithic. So we're not going into any community and saying, hey, so and so called and said you guys should have a Cafe Momentum, and here's what we do, here's who we are, this is what's, it's just using those first points of contact to build more and more relationships. And as we build relationships, we're just listening and learning and answering as many questions as possible, so that we get to a certain point to where, as we begin to shift into, okay, well, now we need to raise capital to be here, it's because the community has told us you're wanted here, which is critically important to the long-term success of the organization. And then we continue to build out that way. In fact, everything that we designed with, each Cafe Momentum being its own individual 501c3 nonprofit, so that it really truly is community driven and community led. We have our operating principles, and we have our guide for what Cafe Momentum is and the Momentum model. And our national team helps to support, efficacy to that. But otherwise, it's owned by the community.
For the program participants, what does that look like? Is it a year? What does kind of graduating from the program look like? And what do you hope to see from the participants as they take that next step?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions, because I think it truly, like, at the end of the day, speaks to the core of how we believe we should be showing up for our kids, within the community. So our program is designed to last 12 months. Our kids work through what we call the tiers of success, and there are 4 tiers, and each tier is designed for them to complete in about 3 months. And if they're not, they're going to sit down with their case manager and their supervisor in the restaurant, and they're going to build out a plan to get to the next tier. And if they don't um, fulfill those requirements in a certain period of time, then they'll be dismissed from the program and told that they can restart. It's kind of our way of practicing what we call compassion and accountability, which is the idea that, we're going to hold the expectation up here because we believe that they can achieve it, and we're going to love them through all the mess of them stumbling, and we're never going to turn our back on them. So we're not saying, hey, you're out, good luck. We're saying, hey, you're dismissed. You can come back and start over, but you have to start back over at tier 1, which also means a pay cut, because they get a pay raise every time they advance in tiers, which is also a great opportunity for us to track success on a continuum rather than a finish line or a finite series of accomplishments. And I say that to say some kids make it to tier 2, and they've got a government issued ID, they got a bank account, they've got stability in the areas that were unstable in their lives through case management, and they want to move on and work at FedEx and make $25 an hour, and that's where their needs are in life. And so we look at that as a successful transition out of the program. Some of our kids have multiple dismissals and restarts, sometimes behavioral, sometimes because they're not tracking through their tiers, and they're with us for 18, 20, 24 months. And that's okay too. I think what I love about it is it's kind of naturally how we parent, like, I think about all the times people have asked me, so what's your success rate? And I turn it back on them. I say, how many kids do you have? I've 3 sons and a daughter. Okay, what's your success rate? Like, almost appalled. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, what's your success rate? Like, define success. Let's say doctor. So what's your success rate? Well, none of my kids are doctors. Okay, so your success rate 0? Or, well, no. I mean, each one of my kids is unique in their own way. My oldest is in construction and he's doing this and that. Then the next one is has his own plumbing company. My daughter, she is working on a PhD in environmental science. And our youngest, he's, well, you know what? He's working in a restaurant, and college wasn't for him, but he's figuring his way out. And he's held this same restaurant job for 9 months, and, real proud. He just takes a little bit longer than his siblings. And okay, so they're all successful, but in their each way. Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Okay. So how do you want me to find success for 1,700 kids who
Hmm.
come from circumstance in which some of them have been trafficked? Some of them have, like, you don't know their life circumstance. Oh, yeah. So we're going to be, thoughtful around that. We have young women who've been trafficked, and the fact that they show up every day and they're starting to look staff in the eyes, that is a PhD in my mind. I mean, monumental victory. And they're going to take a little bit longer too. They're going to be with us a little bit longer than the 12 months, and that's okay. And they're going to stumble, and we're going to love them through it. And so all of that to say, I think for each of us, life is not linear as human beings, and we embrace that at Cafe Momentum and just try to be true to our kids. For them, I think I just want them to wake up every day happy, you know, and that's not easy to do, by the way. And so if we're tracking that way, I think that's incredible success, but also that we're being authentic to them as they're learning their authentic self.
Yeah, and it's so true. And I love kind of that analogy of putting it next to how parents think about how their children grow up because no two paths look alike, and that is perfectly okay. And
That's right.
honestly, the more we take away the yardstick, the happier we all are in so many ways.
It totally. I mean, am I a failure because I run a nonprofit when I went to culinary school to own restaurants? No. Like my own dad went to college to be a PE teacher, was selling men's suits to pay his way through college, and it landed him a job at Xerox, and then he became a businessman selling office products for years, but then became a reserve police officer for the local sheriff's department. And that led him to become opening a private investigation company. And that's what he retired as a private investigator. Like, very nonlinear. And I think that all of us have our own stories about life and how nonlinear they are. So why should we put unrealistic parameters on children that their life can be nonlinear either or two?
Exactly. And so, obviously, the show is called The Negative Space. And within that, we try to look at some of the unseen challenges that are happening
Yeah.
a level underneath that we don't always talk about. But I am curious if there's an unseen challenge here that you want to call out to the Anthem community.
Gosh, I think this would be a whole nother recording. I think I'm going to start with this. Number one is I don't think it was arrogance. I think it was ignorance or naivety. But, successfully built a Cafe Momentum here in Dallas. And I thought that that was a great proof of concept. And that going to carry over into each new market that we went into or each conversation we engaged in. And it's never been that way. We started at zero in Pittsburgh. We started at zero in Atlanta. We started at zero in Denver, because every community that you go into, even though there were people in the community championing for us to come in, we've been still met with the same exact stereotypes in each city, and you start at zero. So that's been truly an unforeseen challenge. I thought we were going to walk into Pittsburgh and they were like, hey, we saw that you've had success in Dallas. Here's how I think it could be successful in Pittsburgh. It was just, you know, not that way. I think the other unforeseen challenges is happens um, outside of your control, and didn't predict a global pandemic 6 years ago, didn't predict, to be in the economy that we're in now and the uncertainties that we have now. And but the show has to go on. And so I think one of the biggest lessons for me, and I think what has been enduring for us, and I think some of it comes from a business background, going back to the beginning conversation, selling my house and taking all the equity out, taking a loan in 2007 as the economy crashed, taught me very quickly back then that you got to be proactive rather than reactive. And so always looking a step ahead. We saw the writing on the wall a year ago that federal funding was being cut to tens of thousands of organizations doing amazing work across the country. And focusing on being proactive. And while we're not recipients of any government funding, so it didn't like necessarily directly affect us, we knew the ripple effect was going to indirectly affect us coming soon. So how do we begin to think through that and diversify our fundraising strategies and tactics to stay ahead of it. And true to form, we're feeling the effects of it 12 months later,
Mhm.
right? And so I think it's all of those things that some you can predict and some, you absolutely can't. I think the other thing that I've learned um, over time is I've heard people ask me certain questions and say certain things in various iterations over time, but eventually the conclusion that I've realized is that, you know, so many people, and kind of metaphorically, but almost quite literally, think that 18 years ago I walked into a detention facility with a business plan. Couldn't be furthest from the truth. I was voluntold that I was teaching 8 kids to make ice cream, and I showed up, and then I listened. And then I continued to listen. And then, you know, Cafe Momentum wasn't built the next week or the next month or the next year. It was 7 years from the time I walked into that facility to the day that we opened the doors in Dallas. And then it was 8 years before we opened a second location. So I think the other, not necessarily unforeseen, but reflectively acknowledged, is that it's a journey and it takes time, and that's okay. You don't have to have the solution before you identify the problem.
Yeah, I think so much within impact work is it is just showing up. And I think a lot of times
Yes.
for a lot of organizations, there's been that similar experience of, as you said, kind of building the plane while we're starting to fly. And
Yes.
I think that's also what makes this work so resilient in a lot of ways is that mindset and that ability to, get your hands dirty in a lot of ways.
I totally agree. And I think, I would also add, one more thing, which is coming from the restaurant business, we restaurants are very tight knit, and it's a really beautiful community of people that support one another and love on one another. And, I'm the beneficiary of friends who just volunteered time to help us get Cafe Momentum open. Like we're working in the restaurant when we opened because we errantly didn't have a host or food runners or like whatever. And friends that own restaurants that were just coming in and helping. I've done the same for other friends, and we're always recommend, hey, go try my friend's restaurant, go do this and that. Going into the nonprofit world, I was a little bit surprised and disappointed that everything that they're so siloed and there's such a like don't touch my piece of the pie. And I kept thinking, man, like if we're trying to solve some and address and create impact in some of our communities, our cities, our states, our countries, the world's biggest issues, we got to work together. We got to work together. We got to do it together. There's also more power with 10,000 voices screaming the same thing than there is with 10,000 voices each screaming it. Look at me, And so I think that was a really unforeseen and kind of big surprise. And it's reared its head in other communities as we've expanded. And, I'll carry to my grave that I don't want to do this work. I don't want to live in a world where it has to exist. So I will partner with anyone. I will concede to anyone. I will give credit to anyone to put me out of business. That's my goal.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge is that territorialness that comes with
Yes.
so much of this work. And from, the funding perspective, like you can see it, but at the end of the day, as you said, like we can make a bigger impact together because everyone can't do
Yes.
everything. Everyone can't touch every corner of the community. We have to be able to come together in those types of ways. And
100%. And you know what? We deserve to. We deserve to support one another. We deserve to feel supported by one another. We should.
so I feel like we hear people oftentimes within criminal justice and the systems that are in place of just trying to fix the people. But I would say we both agree that it's so much more of all of the systems that are surrounding this situation that need the fixing. But I'm curious over the past 18 years in building Cafe Momentum, how has this process really changed your understanding of what needs to happen and what changes actually will create change?
Yeah, I heard someone say one time that, the role of Cafe Momentum is, you know, our kids are come to Cafe Momentum to prepare themselves for the world. We at Cafe Momentum have to prepare the world for them. And I say that because it resonates in ways around exactly what you're saying is if I had a dime for every time I heard somebody tell me the system is broken, um, first of all, I would never have to fundraise ever again in perpetuity. And all my friends' organizations wouldn't have to fundraise either. We'd spread the wealth, you know? The system's not broken. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do. And so to your very point, when a system, when a system is designed the way it is, our kids are left with no other reality, no other lived experience. And then we place the burden of that on the kids, right? I can't think of the number of times that I've heard a child say that they're walking out of a detention facility and the last person they see says, I'll see you in 6 months. It's disgusting. I also can't think of the number of times that I've witnessed a child who has to wear an ankle monitor and it's a default. It's the ankle monitor doesn't work. Like it only holds a charge for 45 minutes. And can you imagine that if that child was trying to work anywhere other than Cafe Momentum, that they would be gainfully employed when every
Yeah.
45 minutes they have to go sit for an hour and charge their ankle? Because if they don't, they go back to jail. There's, no incentive. The number of times that I've heard children that are confronted with a choice. They have a 2 p.m. probation check-in with their probation officer. Where is a 16-year-old child supposed to be at 2 p.m.? School.
School.
Right. So they're left with a choice. Number one is I stay in school and don't check in with my probation officer. And when I do that, I violated my probation and I'm going back to jail. But if I leave school and I go check in with my probation officer, now I'm truant. Because I'm truant, I violated my probation and now I'm going back to jail. And that's their two choices. And that's their, experience. So they don't need fixing. The world around them needs fixing. And that includes those systems. So that's why, at Cafe Momentum, if look at our logic model, which is on our website, one of our outcomes is exiting the justice system, because we believe that builds a bigger conversation and educates people that the system is not broken, that the system is doing exactly what it's been designed to do for decades. And until we acknowledge that and go in and rebuild it, then this is what's going to happen over and over again. And guess what? That's our fault. That's on us, not the kids.
Yeah. We need a rehaul. It is.
Yes.
100%. It is shocking to see and just to hear some of those stories too of what these kids are put up against. And it just backs them into a corner and doesn't give them another option to actually be able to thrive and step away from this.
No, you're right. It says it doesn't matter who you were born to be. I'm telling you right now, this is who you're going to be, and you have no other choice.
Yeah. And as we get to the end of the conversation here, I'd love to put a little shine on some of the program participants. And if there's one person whose story you would like to highlight and to give a little shine to where they're at now and the ways in which they've turned things around and really stepped into a whole new phase of life.
I'm going to go back to that parenting thing that we talked about. Now you're telling me I have to pick my
I can't
favorite
pick your favorite
child.
child.
I'm not Deion Sanders. He ranks his kids. I can't do that. I'll give you one story that I think is really special, and I'll do it because this is one of the first young men that ever completed the program in its entirety. His name is Abasai, and he is the son of Mexican immigrants who came to this country for a better life and worked really hard and provided for him and his brother. And then they got divorced when he was a teenager. And it meant they went from being a 2-income household to 2 single-income households. And for him, in the most literal of senses, it meant that he didn't want to complain to his mom about not eating enough food or not having the right shoes for school or whatever, because that could lead to her blaming his dad. And he didn't want to complain to his dad because it kind of on and on. So in this world, this purgatory world, led him to kind of feel isolated and alone, and it led him to detention. And once he was released and out, he came through the Cafe Momentum program. And I got to watch Abasai walked the stage as the first ever high school graduate of his family. He went on to community college, and while he was at community college, he was accepted into a NASA internship and won an award from NASA. From there, transferred to a 4-year university where he graduated, obviously the first college graduate of his family. And he's now an engineer working in Dallas, and he's the father of 3. And I think what I love the most about that story is that last line, the father of 3, because the story is no longer about him. It's about his own children and the impact that it's going to have on their lives and their kids' lives. And I think it's really special. And I think at the end of the day, the other theme or moral is Avasai is a human being with amazing potential. All we did is provided the space and resource for him to shine, and he did all the rest.
Amazing. And as we talk about all of this, you've been in some incredible places and spaces. We connected at Social Innovation earlier this year in Atlanta to recognize you guys with the Social Innovation Anthem Award. You've won a James Beard Award recently. And it's incredible rooms and people to be in front of and share these stories. But I'm curious, what is it that you want those people to carry with them from the story and this work? And also for the listeners of this podcast.
Oh man, going back to 18 years ago and listening to people ask me what I was going to do when the kids stab each other in the kitchen and they don't want to work, they want to collect a check. And for me, the Anthem Awards, the James Beard Awards, the time recognition, I get very emotional about. I'm not an emotional person. I don't know if kitchens just knock the crying out of me or what, but I cry a lot. And I come to realize it's because for the first time in my 18 years of doing this work, I feel like that's not the way people are talking about our kids anymore. I feel like the perception has shifted, the narrative has shifted. That excites me more than anything. So I want to express gratitude to everyone. I have immense gratitude because it's not me that made the shift. It's people investing time to get to know our kids and advocating for them that has made that shift. It's our kids. It's 1,700 kids walking into a program, in various cities across the country, and believing in themselves when the world doesn't believe in them, and going through the program and hosting people in dining rooms every night and showing the world what it looks like when they walk in their greatness. I want people to know that on behalf of everybody at Café Momentum, we're incredibly grateful, from our kids to our staff, me. And I think the other thing is to be curious. As simple as that sounds, I think when you're curious, you don't have predisposed ideas in your head or beliefs in your head or stereotypes in your head. You have an open mind and an open heart. And I think if we could all be a little bit more curious, we could accomplish a lot more with a lot more people and for a lot more people.
Yeah, curiosity is one of the best things that we can all inject a little bit more into our lives. And to wrap things up here, I would love to hear from you where we can find Café Momentum, how people can support Café Momentum, whether they're in one of your cities or not, and if there's anything that we should be looking out for on the horizon here as well.
Yeah. So the easiest way to learn more and figure out how to get actively engaged is to go to cafemomentum.org. You can not only learn about the organization and our mission, you can learn about each of our locations in Dallas, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, soon to be Denver. You can see our logic model. You can see data. You can make a reservation. You can see the menus. You can do, a million different things. When you're presented with an Anthem Award or a Beard Award and you get on podcasts, people think that you're just flush with cash, and that's never the case. We're all struggling nonprofits. I think people sometimes shy away from, well, I only have $10 and whatever. $10 goes a long way. And so, would love for folks to feel inclined and motivated to donate, and they're welcome to do that. I think I would also acknowledge that a donation isn't a monetary piece of support. It's a message to the team as a whole that you believe in them and to keep going, and it never gets lost on anyone. And if you're interested in learning more about our model, just know that we're in process of building a true flagship Cafe Momentum and National Training Center here in Dallas. It'll be a beautiful 2-story state-of-the-art space that we're designing with the intention to host as many friends and curious folks around the country to learn more about our model and see how they could apply something similar or something completely different in their own communities and what that could look like. So that'll be opening next January, and I hope you get a group together to come visit us and take a tour, and would love to meet people.
Amazing. I can't wait to see that come to life and to get down to Dallas to see it all in person as well. But thank you so much for joining me, for doing this work, and for being a part of the negative space.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly, truly, truly grateful.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, rate us, all of those things wherever you're watching or listening. For more information about the Anthem Awards, you can follow us at Anthem Awards on social media or anthemawards.com. And if you're making good work, we'd love to see it. You can enter your work into the Anthem Awards this year before Friday, July 31st. Thank you again for listening. I'm Patricia McLoughlin, and this was The Negative Space.